Imagine standing at the altar, pledging your life to an alpha you respect, but every fiber of your being yearns for a past you can't forget. This isn't just about a wedding. It's about a heart torn between duty, power, and an undying love that refuses to fade. Will I choose loyalty or the love that haunts my dreams? The chandeliers burned like captured stars, casting light over the hall of polished marble and velvet-draped walls. Every surface gleamed, as though determined to remind the bride that she was stepping into a world where imperfection was not tolerated. She walked slowly, veiled and silent, each step echoing in the cavernous space. The gown trailed behind her, heavy lace, jeweled embroidery, a masterpiece tailored for royalty rather than a woman who still carried doubts. Each stitch felt like a chain. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They were not directed at her beauty, though she was radiant, but at the man standing at the altar. Alpha. Tall, broad-shouldered, presence alone commanding obedience. His suit was black, accented with gold. His posture effortlessly regal. When his eyes fell on her, she felt both honored and trapped. His smile did not soften the steel in his gaze. This was not simply a wedding. It was a coronation, and she was both bride and trophy. As she reached him, the alpha extended a hand. She placed hers in his, the crowd roaring with approval. But beneath the roar, beneath the vows rehearsed 100 times, her heart betrayed her. It whispered a name she had sworn to forget. The vows echoed in her ears long after the ceremony ended. "I bind myself to you," she had said, voice steady though her chest trembled. The alpha's kiss on her lips had been firm, claiming, undeniable. Guests cheered, glasses clinked, the kingdom rejoiced. But in the quiet moments, while attendants adjusted her gown, while musicians struck celebratory chords, a memory slid in uninvited. The first love. A field in late summer, the scent of wildflowers, laughter under an open sky. His hand brushing hers, the electricity of something pure and unbound by duty. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not with ownership but wonder. The alpha's world was marble floors and watchful eyes. Her first love's world had been dirt paths and shared secrets. One was security, the other freedom. As the alpha led her through the reception, speaking of their future, she forced her smile to stay in place. But beneath the practiced expression, a question pulsed louder than the music. Had she chosen survival over happiness? Crystal glasses clinked in unison. To the alpha and his bride, voices boomed, echoing through the hall. She lifted her glass with grace, the gold band on her finger catching the light. The alpha sat beside her, one hand resting possessively on hers, the other raised to acknowledge his pack's loyalty. He was charming when he chose to be. His deep voice steady, his promises grand. He spoke of unity, strength, of how his Luna would stand by his side as they forged a new era. Every word was met with adoration. She too raised her glass, her smile unwavering. But inside a rebellion stirred. Each toast felt like a brick sealing her into a gilded cage. Then, for a fleeting second, she swore she saw him, her first love, at the edge of the crowd. A trick of the light, perhaps, or a cruel invention of memory. But the thought of him lingering, watching, unable to speak, made her chest tighten. The alpha squeezed her hand. "You are mine now," he whispered against her ear, low enough for only her to hear. The words were meant to reassure. Instead they sounded like a verdict. When the music faded and the last guest departed, silence filled the chamber. Candles burned low, casting the bedchamber in a golden haze. The alpha moved with unhurried confidence, removing his jacket, unfastening the gold cufflinks that glimmered like weapons. She stood by the window, veil discarded, hair unpinned, the weight of expectation pressing harder than the gown she wore. He approached her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You are beautiful," he said, voice softer now, though still threaded with authority. "This bond will make us stronger. Together we are untouchable." His words should have comforted her. Instead, they reminded her of the life she had surrendered. A simple touch by a stream, a promise whispered under the stars. Those memories felt fragile now, on the brink of erasure. The alpha leaned closer, lips brushing hers with a mix of desire and possession. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the voice inside her that screamed another name. In that moment she knew. She had married not just a man but an empire. And empires were never built without sacrifice. The banquet stretched on, endless courses of venison and roasted pheasant, silver platters gleaming under candlelight. She smiled at every toast, laughed at the right moments, nodded when the Alpha's warriors saluted him. To the watching world, she was radiant, glowing with joy. But beneath the table, her fingers traced the hem of her gown in restless circles. The Alpha's hand never left hers, firm, reassuring, a reminder of his claim. Every now and then, her eyes drifted to the far corner of the hall. She half expected to see him again. Her first love. The boy who once taught her that love wasn't supposed to feel like a contract. Of course, the corner was empty. Memory played cruel tricks, weaving illusions in the shadows. Yet the ache refused to fade. When the Alpha leaned toward her, murmuring about heirs and legacy, she nodded, but her mind was far from the hall. It was in the meadow where he first kissed her, where the world had been small and uncomplicated, where vows had been whispered with no witnesses and no crowns. And the cruelest part. She still felt that kiss on her lips, though it had been years since it happened. That night she dreamed of him. The dream began as it always did. Moonlight spilling over a quiet lake, the scent of pine in the air. His laughter chasing away every doubt she had ever carried. He was there, barefoot in the grass, his shirt undone at the collar. His eyes alight with mischief and promise. "Run with me," he whispered in the dream, just as he had whispered all those years ago. "Leave the world behind." And in the dream, she almost believed she had. She felt the cool grass under her feet, the warmth of his hand pulling her forward, the safety of his embrace. But the dream twisted, as dreams always do. The Alpha's voice thundered across the meadow, calling her name. The grass burned, the lake turned black, and the boy's face blurred until only sorrow remained. She woke with a start, the Alpha's arm heavy across her waist. His breathing was even, untroubled. She lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the thought that the dream was truer than her reality. Morning came with pomp. Servants laid out gowns embroidered with gold thread, jewels heavy enough to bruise her collarbone, a breakfast table that could have fed a village. The Alpha spoke of councils and treaties, his tone calm, measured, commanding. She nodded, listened, even smiled. But when the servants left, silence stretched between them. "You are quiet today," he observed, sipping his coffee. His eyes were sharp, unreadable. "I'm only tired," she lied. His gaze lingered. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his own. "You will grow accustomed to this life. It will become easier. You will see." She forced a smile, but her heart ached. Accustomed was not the same as belonging. Later, walking through the manicured gardens, she traced the marble fountains with her fingers. The flowers were arranged in perfect rows, trimmed and controlled. No wildness, no surprises. Just like her new life. And she thought of him again, her first love. His world had been messy, unpredictable, full of laughter and dirt under their nails. Had been alive. Now she was a rose clipped too soon, displayed in a crystal vase. Beautiful, decorative, dying slowly. Chapter 8. The silent battle. The nights became the hardest. The Alpha was not cruel. In fact, he was attentive. He asked about her comfort, ensured she had what she needed, spoke to her with a gentleness few ever witnessed. His people adored him for his fairness, his strength. But affection from him felt like iron wrapped in silk. Every touch reminded her of his claim, every kiss of the bond she had sworn to honor. Gratitude bloomed, yes, but not passion. And still, in the quiet of the dark, when the Alpha's breathing steadied beside her, another name burned in her chest. Her first love. The more she tried to banish him, the more vivid he became. The way he had laughed when she tripped over roots, The way he had whispered poetry with words he barely remembered. The way he had kissed her as though the world might end. Tears slid silently down her cheeks as she stared at the ceiling, willing herself not to shatter. To the world, she was the Alpha's Luna, regal and unshakable. But in her heart, she was still that girl in the meadow, caught between destiny and desire. The sun poured through the tall windows of the Alpha's estate, gilding the room in soft gold. Servants bustled quietly, setting trays of fruit and spiced breads, pouring warm tea into porcelain cups painted with wolves and moons. She sat at the long dining table, still in her nightgown, hair falling loosely over her shoulders. The Alpha entered, commanding even in simple linen, his presence filling the room like a storm waiting to break. "Good morning, my Luna," he said with a rare smile. Her lips curved politely, but her heart gave no answer. He kissed her forehead, not hurried, not rough, a gesture of ownership laced with tenderness. He took his seat at the head of the table, gestured for her to join him. The breakfast spread was rich. Honey-glazed pastries, smoked meats, bowls of berries as ripe as jewels. It was abundance laid bare. She remembered mornings in her first love's world, one loaf of bread shared between two, laughter spilling louder than hunger. Here her plate was full, yet her spirit felt hollow. The Alpha's estate was a kingdom within itself. Corridors lined with tapestries depicting generations of rulers, gardens so manicured they seemed drawn by hand, training yards filled with warriors loyal to his command. He walked her through it all as though unveiling treasures. "This is your home now," he said, gesturing to the library filled with ancient tomes. "Everything here is yours." He wanted her awe. He wanted her to be proud, to claim this life without hesitation. And part of her almost did. The weight of security was not nothing. She trailed her fingers across shelves of leather-bound books, let her gaze sweep over sun-dappled courtyards, listened as the Alpha's warriors bowed and addressed her as, "My lady." It was intoxicating in its own way. Safety had a seduction all its own. But even as she smiled, even as she said the proper words, a quiet thought echoed. Does safety feel like love? Or only like protection? That night, when the world outside their chambers quieted, the Alpha drew near. He was patient, deliberate, the kind of man who knew his strength and wielded it with care. "I know this is all new to you," he murmured, his hand brushing against hers. "I don't expect you to give me your heart at once. But I will earn it." His words startled her. For a moment, she saw not just the ruler, not just the warrior, but a man. A man who wanted to be loved, not only obeyed. And when he kissed her, it was not just possession. It was a plea. For the first time, her resolve wavered. Gratitude stirred and warmth, faint but real. Perhaps she could learn to love him. Perhaps her heart could be persuaded by constancy rather than fire. Yet, even as she leaned into his embrace, another image rose unbidden. The meadow, the laughter, the stolen kiss under starlight. A love that had never needed to be earned because it had bloomed naturally. Tears threatened, but she hid them well. Weeks passed. She settled into routines. Morning councils where she sat at the Alpha's side, afternoons in gardens that never knew wildness, evenings filled with feasts and dances. The pack began to accept her, if cautiously. The Alpha defended her fiercely, his words silencing doubts. She was Luna, crowned and unmovable. And yet, she often caught herself staring beyond the walls. Beyond the forests that edged the estate. Beyond the horizon itself. The Alpha adored her in his own way. He shielded her, provided for her, showered her with treasures and words meant to soothe. He believed love was built from duty, loyalty, constancy. But she could not escape the truth that gnawed at her chest. She was cherished but not free. The estate glittered with opulence, but each gem, each gown, each vow felt like a bar in a cage. Golden cage, yes, but a cage all the same. The estate gates opened only rarely, and when they did, it was under the watchful eyes of guards. Yet on this day, the Alpha allowed her into the marketplace, insisting it would help the people see their Luna walking among them. The market was alive with color and sound. Merchants hawking silks dyed like sunsets, baskets brimming with fruit, children darting between stalls. She smiled when she had to, but her heart was elsewhere, restless and searching. And then she felt it. That unmistakable pull. A tingle across her skin, like lightning brushing against her soul. She turned her head sharply, eyes scanning the crowd. A figure lingered at the edge of the square, half hidden in shadow. His gaze met hers for the briefest of moments, enough for recognition to flare. The same dark eyes, the same fire that had once lit her nights. Her first love. But as quickly as he appeared, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Her breath caught, her pulse raced. She could not speak it aloud, not with guards at her side. But inside she knew. He was alive. And he had found her. That night she could not sleep. Every creak of the estate, every whisper of wind against the windows stirred her. She rose, wrapped in a cloak, and stepped onto the balcony. The forest beyond the walls seemed to lean closer, beckoning her. And then she heard it, faint but clear. A whistle. Their whistle. The secret tune they had once used to signal each other in the fields when no one else could know. Her knees weakened. She gripped the railing, heart thundering. Could not be coincidence. He was out there, somewhere in the night, calling to her. But the alpha slept in the room beyond. His trust heavy as a chain around her neck. To answer would be betrayal. To ignore would be torment. She pressed her palm to her lips, fighting the cry that longed to escape. The bond was still there. Invisible. Unbreakable. And it was tightening. Days passed. She played the role of Luna, smiling at banquets, walking the gardens, listening as the Alpha's council droned on about borders and treaties. But her mind was consumed by the shadow she had seen, the whistle she had heard. Then it happened. A maid delivered a tray of tea to her chambers. On the tray, tucked beneath the cup, was a folded scrap of parchment. Her hand trembled as she hid it quickly, waiting until the door shut behind her. She opened it with desperate fingers. 3 words, scrawled in a hand she knew better than her own. I am here. The room spun. She pressed the paper to her chest, tears spilling freely now. He had risked everything to reach her. He was close. He had not given up. And yet, the letter was both salvation and curse. If the Alpha discovered it, blood would be spilled. Perhaps her lover's. Perhaps her own. She burned the parchment in the fire, but the words seared themselves into her soul. The Alpha grew gentler with her as the weeks stretched on. He took her riding, gifted her jewels, spoke of a future where they would rule together. To all the world, it looked as though she was settling into her role, content beside him. But inside a storm raged. Every smile she gave was shadowed by the memory of another smile, another kiss. Every night she lay in the Alpha's embrace. She dreamed of the one who had stolen her heart long before vows and crowns. And then came the storm outside, a thunderous downpour rattling the windows, lightning splitting the sky. She stood by the glass, staring into the night, when a flash illuminated the trees beyond the walls. For the briefest instant she saw him. Standing there, drenched in rain, defiant against the storm. Watching her window. Her breath hitched, her hand pressed to the glass. The bond surged, wild and undeniable. And she knew, with a certainty that burned. The unseen threads between them were pulling tighter, drawing her toward a fate she could no longer ignore. Chapter 17. Behind the veil of duty. Life in the Alpha's world was gilded, but the gold was thin. She moved through her days with practiced grace, seated beside him at council, smiling faintly at his declarations of strategy, accepting compliments from pack elders who praised her adaptability. Outwardly, she played the part of Luna flawlessly. But inwardly, the letter's ghost still burned in her chest. Every shadow reminded her of him. Every silence carried his voice. And as the Alpha tightened his hold, presenting her more openly as his queen, parading her at ceremonies, she felt herself split in two. One half, Luna, bound by vows, draped in jewels, trapped in a golden cage. The other half, a woman haunted by a first love who refused to vanish. The halves warred within her, and the war was becoming unbearable. It happened when the moon was full, silver light spilling across the grounds. She slipped from the alpha's bed, heart hammering as she moved silently through the halls. Guards lingered at the gates, but she had memorized their routes, their moments of inattention. Beyond the walls, the forest waited. And so did he. When she reached the clearing, he was there, leaning against a tree as though he had been carved from the night itself. His clothes were rough, travel-worn, and his hair hung damp from the lingering mist, but his eyes burned exactly as she remembered. For a long heartbeat, neither moved. Then she crossed the distance, every step tearing at the thin thread of self-control that had kept her bound. "Why are you here?" she whispered, though her trembling voice betrayed that she already knew. "Because you're mine," he said simply. No pretense, no apology, just truth. And then his arms were around her, and the years, the vows, the alpha's shadow, all of it fell away. The kiss was inevitable. The moment their lips met, the world collapsed into heat. She had lived months in a carefully ordered life, suffocated by restraint, and now, here in the arms of the man who had claimed her heart long before the alpha, she burned. Every touch was forbidden. Every gasp was a rebellion. But with every stolen second, she remembered who she had been before the crown, before the vows. A girl in love. A woman free. "Do you know what you risk?" she whispered between kisses. "I risk everything," he answered. "Because you are worth everything." The words seared her more than the fire of his embrace. For the first time in too long she felt alive. And yet, beneath the passion, fear coiled. If the alpha ever discovered this, the punishment would be ruthless. But desire was louder than fear. Now, dawn came cruelly. She slipped back into the estate, cheeks flushed, hair damp from the forest's dew. She moved carefully, hoping the silence of the halls would keep her secret safe. But secrets leave traces. The alpha studied her that morning as they sat at breakfast. His gaze sharp, lingering longer than usual. He asked no questions, but the weight of his silence was crushing. She forced herself to smile, to sip tea as though her lips had not touched another's hours before. But inside, her soul was ablaze, caught between fear and ecstasy. Later, when she stood at her window, she saw him again in the forest, waiting, watching. And she realized with a jolt of both terror and exhilaration, there would be no going back. The forbidden flames had been lit. And flames, once lit, do not stay hidden for long. The alpha was no fool. He had built his empire by watching, by calculating, by reading the smallest tremors in a rival's stance. And now he was watching her. At dinners, his gaze lingered longer. At councils, he studied her silence. Even in the privacy of their chambers, his touch became a test, pressing not just for closeness but for truth. And she, trembling beneath the weight of his scrutiny, wondered how long she could keep the mask intact. Every laugh felt rehearsed. Every glance stolen at shadows outside risked discovery. The crown upon her head grew heavier by the day. The affair continued, reckless and raw. Each midnight, she found her way back to him, to the man who still carried her soul. Their whispers in the forest grew louder, bolder. They planned escapes they never dared to attempt, dreamed of futures they knew could never exist. And yet, in those stolen hours, she felt freer than she ever had beneath the alpha's golden roof. But freedom has a cost. One night, as they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers and said, "He knows." She froze. "What do you mean?" "I've seen his scouts. We're being watched. If we don't stop." She silenced him with a kiss, though her heart pounded with terror. Because deep down she knew he was right. The alpha's silence was no longer ignorance. It was strategy. It happened the next evening. She was summoned to his study, a place of order, of books and maps and the heavy scent of authority. He did not look up as she entered, merely gestured for her to close the door. When his eyes finally lifted, they were unreadable. "You wander at night," he said. It was not a question. Her throat tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. He rose, crossed the room, and lifted her chin with one hand. His grip was firm, almost gentle, but beneath it power simmered like restrained fire. "Do not mistake my silence for blindness," he murmured. "You are Luna. You are mine. Whatever shadow lingers in your heart, bury it, or I will bury it for you." The threat was quiet, but it struck deeper than a shout. She left the room shaken, her chest torn between fury and fear. For the first time she truly saw the cage she was in. And the lock was closing. The next night she did not sneak away. She ran. Through the halls, past the guards, into the forest. The Alpha's warning burned in her mind, but the thought of losing her first love burned hotter. When she reached him, her tears fell like storms. "We can't keep hiding," she cried. "We'll be destroyed if we stay in this game." He held her, his jaw set, his heartbeat wild against hers. "Then we leave. Tonight. No more delays." The words felt like fire. Dangerous. Liberating. Final. For a moment she believed it was possible. That the chains could be broken, that destiny could be rewritten, that she could choose love over power and live. But in the distance, the howl of wolves rose. A warning. Summons. The Alpha knew. And the chains were already breaking. Violently, irrevocably. The forest was alive with sound. Wolves howled from every direction, their cries echoing through the trees. The night, once her sanctuary, had become a trap. He grabbed her hand. "We need to move. Now." They ran, stumbling over roots, breath ragged, hearts thundering. Behind them, branches cracked under the weight of pursuit. Every step carried the knowledge that discovery was no longer a risk. It was a certainty. The Alpha's silence had ended. The reckoning had begun. They didn't make it far. In a clearing lit by moonlight, they found themselves surrounded. Shadows moved between the trees. Tall, broad, gleaming-eyed figures in wolf form. The Alpha's enforcers. His most loyal. And then he stepped forward. Alpha. His presence was a storm contained within a single man. His gaze fell on her first, then lingered on the hand that still clung to her lover's. "Release her," he ordered. The words were calm, but they carried the weight of law. Her lover's grip tightened. "No." It was one word, but it shattered everything. The Alpha's eyes glowed, fury simmering just beneath the surface. "You dare," he growled. The fight was inevitable. The Alpha shifted first, his body tearing into the monstrous strength of his wolf form. The enforcers held back, knowing this was not their battle. Her lover, though human, moved with desperate ferocity. He wielded no claws, no supernatural strength, but love itself lent him power. They collided in a storm of violence. The Alpha struck like a beast of legend. Her lover fought with the raw, reckless will of a man who had nothing left to lose. She screamed, torn between them, watching as blood splattered the earth, as growls and cries split the night. Every blow carried the weight of her divided heart. Every wound deepened the impossibility of choosing. The fight ended brutally. Her lover lay bloodied, gasping. His body broken but his spirit unbowed. The Alpha loomed over him, chest heaving, eyes wild with rage. "Yield," the Alpha demanded. Her lover spat blood and whispered, "Never." The Alpha raised his claws for the final strike. And she moved. Throwing herself between them, arms outstretched, tears streaming, she screamed, "Enough!" For a heartbeat, everything froze. The Alpha's claws hovered inches from her chest, trembling with restraint. Her lover's blood dripped onto the soil. And in that silence, she knew. There would be no peace, no compromise. Her heart had chained two men into a war. And only one could survive it. The forest reeked of iron. The Alpha's claws hovered inches from her chest, trembling not with hesitation but with restraint. He could strike. He wanted to strike. But the sight of her shielding the broken man on the ground bound him in chains of his own. Her lover coughed, crimson staining his lips, yet his gaze clung to hers, unyielding. "Don't let him own you," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. Her heart fractured. Two men, one broken, one furious, both tethered to her in ways she could not sever. And in that clearing, with wolves watching, silence heavier than any roar, she realized, whatever choice she made, something vital would burn. The alpha shifted back, towering, bare-chested, blood streaking his arms. His voice was cold steel. "You will come back with me," he said, his command echoing through the clearing. "You will stand at my side as Luna, or you will fall with him. There is no third path." Her body shook, caught between fire and stone. The enforcers waited. No one dared move, as though the world itself held its breath. And she, trembling and torn, whispered, "I cannot stop loving him." It was a confession, a rebellion, a death sentence. The alpha's face darkened, but he did not strike. Instead he turned, signaling his wolves. "Take him," he ordered. "And keep her under watch. The oath of Luna has been broken." Her scream echoed through the night as her lover was dragged away. The estate became her prison. Windows locked. Guards at her doors. Every move monitored, every whisper weighed. The alpha no longer touched her tenderly. His hands were possession, not affection. And still her heart burned elsewhere. Every night, she dreamt of the man imprisoned in the alpha's dungeons. His voice calling through the stone walls of her mind. Every day, she replayed her confession, wondering if it had doomed them both. Once, the alpha came to her chamber. His expression unreadable. "You will learn," he said quietly, "that loyalty is survival. Love is weakness." She looked him in the eye and answered, "Then I choose weakness." His silence was more terrifying than rage. The pack gathered days later. A ritual ancient and merciless, demanded by tradition. The alpha stood before them, declaring the Luna's betrayal. His words were law, and his wolves howled their judgment. But when the time came to strip her of her title, something shifted. She stepped forward, voice breaking yet fierce. "You can take the crown. You can bind my body. But my heart is mine. And it burns for him." Gasps tore through the crowd. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some wolves sneered, others looked away, but a few, just a few, met her gaze with something like respect. The alpha's fury was palpable, but so was his dilemma. To kill her was to shatter his authority. To keep her was to endure defiance. The oath of Luna had turned to ashes. And from ashes something new would rise. The ritual should have broken her. Instead, it planted something dangerous. Her words, "My heart is mine," echoed long after the pack dispersed. Whispers spread through corridors and courtyards. Some called her a disgrace, unworthy of the Luna's mantle. Others, especially the young and restless, repeated her words like a mantra. The alpha ruled with iron, but cracks had begun to show. And in those cracks, seeds of rebellion took root. Her lover remained in the dungeon. Every attempt to reach him was blocked by guards, every plea dismissed. But she found ways. Slipped notes hidden in folded linens. Coded words sung in lullabies the servants carried past the cells. Through whispers, through stolen fragments, their bond survived. One night, when the moon was thin, a message reached her. "Do not give up. They cannot break me." She pressed the words to her chest, tears wetting the parchment. He was still fighting even in chains. And so would she. The alpha grew harsher. His counsels turned bloody, punishments swift and merciless. He needed to reassert dominance, to remind his wolves that defiance carried consequences. But it was too late. Where once the pack obeyed without question, now hesitation lingered. Eyes darted toward her, searching for silent approval. The alpha noticed, and it enraged him. One evening, he cornered her in the great hall, fury radiating from every muscle. "You poison them," he accused. She stood her ground, trembling but unbroken. "No, you poison yourself." Gasps filled the hall. The alpha's roar shook the walls, but for the first time, the crowd did not join him. The crown had begun to shatter. The rebellion did not come as a war. Came as sparks. A patrol refused to carry out a brutal order. An elder spoke softly in her defense. 2 young wolves smuggled food to the dungeons, risking everything to keep her lover alive. The alpha saw it all, and the cracks widened into fractures he could not seal. One night, as she stood by her window, she saw flames rising from the training grounds. Not wild but deliberate. "Sign," she whispered into the night. "It has begun." And though fear coiled in her veins, hope lit beside it. Because the shattered crown was not just the alpha's downfall. It was the beginning of her rise. The estate shook with screams. At dawn, the rebellion revealed itself in full. Wolves loyal to her whispered words turned against the alpha's enforcers. Claws clashed against claws, howls split the skies, and the grounds that once echoed with ceremony now rang with war. She watched from her balcony, heart hammering. This was no quiet act of defiance. It was an uprising. And she, with trembling hands pressed to the stone railing, knew that her choices had lit the fire. She could not stay idle. While chaos raged above, she descended into the depths of the estate. The dungeons smelled of blood and damp stone, each step echoing louder than the last. Guards lay unconscious, struck down not by her but by rebels who had cleared the path. When she reached his cell, he was slumped against the wall, battered but alive. His eyes lifted, and when they met hers, hope sparked like lightning. "I told you," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "They can't break me." She broke the chains with keys pressed into her hand by unseen allies. When the shackles fell, she caught him as he staggered forward. And for the first time in too long they stood together, free. Freedom did not last long. As they emerged into the chaos above, the alpha stood waiting. His chest was bare. His body streaked with blood not his own. His eyes glowed like twin embers of fury. "You would free a traitor," he snarled, voice rumbling like thunder. "You would betray me openly." She stepped forward, placing herself between the 2 men once again, but this time her voice did not tremble. "I betray nothing," she said. "I choose." The alpha roared, his wolf bursting forth in a storm of fur and fangs. And the final battle began. The war was chaos incarnate. The alpha fought like a god of destruction, his claws rending, his howls commanding those still loyal to him. Her lover, though mortal, wielded every ounce of defiance, striking with blade and fire, refusing to yield. Around them, the pack tore itself apart, brother against brother, sister against sister. Some fought for tradition, others for freedom. Blood soaked the soil, and the moon bore witness to their fall. She moved among them, no longer the trembling Luna but a force in her own right. Rallying rebels, shielding the wounded, raising her voice until it carried over the din. "We are not his slaves. We are wolves. We are free." Her words struck like lightning. Wolves turned mid-battle, rallying not to the alpha but to her. And the tide began to shift. The fight reached its climax in the great hall. The alpha, bloodied but unbroken, towered over them, fury radiating like a storm. Her lover stood by her side, blade raised, breath ragged but resolve unshaken. "This is your last chance," the alpha growled. "Kneel and live. Defy me and die." She lifted her chin, voice ringing clear. "I will never kneel again." The words broke something greater than stone. They broke the crown itself. The alpha lunged, but this time he faced not a frightened bride, but a leader born from fire. Wolves surged at her side, striking not as rebels but as a new pack. His reign crumbled beneath their claws. And when he finally fell, his roar echoing into silence, the hall shook not with mourning but with liberation. The estate lay in ruins, the pack fractured, the future uncertain. But amidst the wreckage, a new dawn broke. Wolves who had once whispered now stood openly at her side. Her lover, bruised and bloodied, held her hand with quiet pride. The war had ended, but peace was fragile, tentative. Standing before the remnants of the pack, She spoke with a voice both weary and unyielding. We have lost much. But we are not lost. From ashes we rise. Not as slaves to fear, but as wolves bound by choice, not chains. Pack bowed. Not to the Alpha. To her. The war was over, but peace did not arrive gently. Smoke still curled from the shattered halls, bodies still lay broken in the courtyards, and the once proud banners of the Alpha's reign had been reduced to ash. The wolves who had fought and bled alongside her looked at her now with awe, fear, and expectation. She walked among the wounded, hands trembling as she pressed cloth against torn flesh, whispered comfort into ears that would never hear again. Victory had come at a price, and she bore its weight like a mantle she had not yet chosen but could not shed. At her side, her lover carried buckets of water, bandages, anything he could manage. His presence was a balm, a reminder of who she had once been, and of the choice she had made. But in every wolf's eyes, she saw the unspoken question. What now? Without the Alpha, the pack was fractured. Some wolves bent knee to her immediately, calling her the Luna who had become their savior. Others growled in corners, whispering that a woman could not lead without a mate to crown her. Still others spoke of choosing a new Alpha from among the bloodlines, a male heir who could restore tradition. The Council of Elders, gray and sharp-eyed, called her into the ruined throne room. The crown, broken during the battle, still lay shattered at the foot of the dais. You are strong, one elder said. But strength alone does not bind a pack. Wolves without a king are wolves without order. She lifted the broken crown, feeling its jagged edges bite into her palm. Then let us forge order anew, she answered. Not by kings but by choice. The hall trembled with the weight of her defiance. The days that followed were filled with trials. Envoys from rival packs arrived, bristling with curiosity and disdain. They circled her like predators testing prey, demanding to know who ruled now that the Alpha lay dead. One Alpha sneered openly. A queen without a king is no queen at all. Step aside, girl, before the pack tears itself apart. Her wolves bristled, growling low, but she raised a hand. My pack fought for freedom, she said evenly. Not for another crown forced upon their heads. I am no girl. I am the one who stood when your kind bowed. And if you wish to test me. She bared her teeth, not as a bride, but as a wolf. Try. The hall erupted in snarls, but no wolf moved. She had drawn the line in blood, and for the first time, the world saw not a bride of an Alpha, but a queen in her own right. But even as she rose, shadows crept in. Her lover, free at last, found himself alien among wolves. He bore no shifting blood, no claim to dominance. Whispers called him weakness, a chain that would drag her down. At night, when they lay together in the quiet, he confessed the truth. They will never follow me, he said. And they may never follow you if you keep me at your side. Her heart twisted. She had fought a war for love, and yet love threatened to undo her reign before it had begun. You are my heart, she whispered fiercely. And they will learn, or they will burn. But as she spoke, doubt flickered in her chest. Could a pack built on blood accept a leader who had chosen love over lineage? The answer came swiftly. On the northern border, rival wolves struck, sensing weakness. Their attack was brutal, precise, a warning that peace would not be gifted to her reign. Her pack scrambled to defend, still raw from the wounds of civil war. She rode to the front, cloak torn, hair unbound, eyes blazing with fury. Standing atop a ridge, she lifted her voice, not as the Alpha's Luna, but as the pack's shield. Stand with me or fall with him, she cried, invoking the ghost of the Alpha they had slain. This is not his reign. This is ours. The wolves surged as one. The battle was vicious, but by nightfall the enemy broke, driven back into the forests. Blood stained her hands, her teeth, her soul. Yet when her wolves howled in victory, they howled not for a king, but for her. The council could delay no longer. In the ruins of the great hall, amidst banners scorched and stones still cracked, they called her to claim the crown. But she did not lift the jagged, broken circlet left behind by the alpha. Instead, she cast it into the fire. "I will not wear the crown of a tyrant," she declared. From the flames, a blacksmith drew forth a new circlet, hammered of iron, rimmed with silver, unadorned by jewels. A crown not of kingship, but of survival. When it was placed upon her head, the wolves bowed. Not all in joy, not all in peace, but they bowed. Her reign had begun. And as her lover's hand slipped into hers, she knew the war was not over, had only changed shape. Leadership is a crown of iron and ash, and both cut deep. Though her coronation had been claimed, the silence of submission was not loyalty. She felt it in every council meeting, every glance cast behind lowered lashes. Wolves who bowed in the day whispered treason in the dark. Some longed for a new male alpha, others sought alliances outside the walls. She walked the halls with the certainty of a hunted creature, each shadow stretching too far, each footstep echoing too long. Power had made her visible, but it had also made her vulnerable. The throne she sat upon was not carved from stone, but from sand. And the tide was already rising. It began with whispers. Servants caught in corridors, guards muttering at their posts, all speaking of him. The human, the outsider, the man who had stolen the queen's heart. One night, his horse was found slaughtered, its throat cut clean, a warning carved into the barn wall. Wolves do not bow to men. She stood at the scene, blood dripping like ink into straw, her rage barely contained. He tried to calm her, fingers brushing her cheek. "They hate me," he said softly. "And if they hate me, they will come for you." But she shook her head. "They will not break me. And they will not break us." Yet as she lay awake beside him that night, the truth gnawed at her. Love had won her a war, but could it cost her a kingdom? Rumors arrived like smoke before fire. Travelers spoke of witches seen near the borders, their chants echoing across the rivers, their eyes glinting with unnatural light. Wolves went missing, found later with bones turned to dust and hearts hollowed out. The council scoffed. "Old wives' tales," they said. But she knew better. The stories were too precise, the timing too cruel. In her private chamber, an old woman was brought before her, cloaked, trembling, eyes white as snow. She whispered of a pact made generations ago, between the wolves and the witches, sealed in blood. That pact, she claimed, had been broken the night the alpha died. And now, the witches were coming to collect their due. Betrayal came not from shadows, but from the very heart of her court. During a heated council meeting, voices rose over whether to prepare for war against the witches or appease them. Her lover stood at her side, silent but steady, while her wolves argued. Then steel flashed. A dagger meant for her heart was deflected only by instinct and speed. The blow landed instead in the chest of one of her most loyal guards. He fell before her throne, blood spilling like wine across the stone. The council erupted in chaos. Wolves turned on wolves, accusations flew, and in the madness, the assassin was torn apart before answers could be pulled from his throat. When silence fell, the hall was soaked in blood, not from enemies but from her own. The betrayal was only the beginning. Within days, scouts returned with news that chilled the bones of even the fiercest wolves. Rival packs had allied with witches. Together they carried weapons forged with curses, blades that could cut deeper than fang or claw. She watched as her warriors tested those cursed chains on captured prey. When the silver bit into fur, wolves howled not just in pain but in despair, unable to shift, their power shackled by fire that burned from the inside out. War was no longer a matter of claws and teeth. It was sorcery, and her pack stood unprepared. Yet fear alone could not rule her. She stood before her wolves, the cursed chain in her hand, its fire searing her skin. She did not flinch. "If fire is their weapon," she declared, "then we will become fire." The night was heavy with storm as she gathered her pack in the great hall. Wolves of every rank filled the space. Warriors with bandaged arms, mothers clutching pups, elders leaning on canes. They all looked to her, waiting for words that could bind them tighter than fear. She raised her voice, not with the sharpness of command, but with the resonance of promise. I did not claim this crown to repeat the chains of kings. I claimed it because I believe we can be more. Not slaves to tradition, not pawns of witches, not prey for rivals. We are wolves. We are survivors. And if destiny itself wishes to break us, then we will break destiny. The hall erupted in howls, a sound that shook the stones, that drowned out doubt. That night, under lightning and thunder, she made her oath. Not as a Luna beside a king. Not as a queen bound by crown. But as the fire that would burn through betrayal, sorcery, and fate itself. The night did not end in silence. From the moment the oath left her lips, the world seemed to conspire to test it. Scouts came running before dawn, their fur ragged, their voices trembling as they delivered the news. The witches had moved. They had not crept from shadows or lingered on borders. They had swept like a storm, burning villages, scattering wolves, leaving behind nothing but ashes and bones. The scent of their magic rode the wind, acrid and sharp, carrying with it the memory of fire that did not come from flame. Wolves could heal from claws and teeth, but wounds from sorcery festered, spreading rot through bone and spirit alike. She rode to the outskirts herself, unwilling to trust reports when the truth demanded her own eyes. The land she entered was a graveyard. Trees blackened and split, streams poisoned with unnatural hues, corpses stiffened with expressions of horror frozen into their faces. She had seen death before, but this was something else. This was desecration. Her wolves followed, hackles raised. Yet even the bravest among them kept their distance from the scorched earth. It was as if the ground itself carried a curse. At the center of the ruin stood a message, scrawled in ash and blood, carved deep into stone so no wind could erase it. The words were clear, deliberate. The queen bows or the queen burns. Her claws flexed against her palms, drawing blood. She did not flinch. They had wanted her attention. They had it. But the witches did not strike with curses alone. They were cunning, calculating. Days later, while the pack scrambled to defend the borders, they struck at her heart. Her lover vanished. One moment he was within the safety of the keep, the next he was gone. His guards slaughtered, their bodies twisted into grotesque shapes that no natural death could explain. She tore through the keep herself, searching rooms, calling his name, fury twisting her lungs into fire. But the truth soon arrived, carried by a witch's raven that perched brazenly on her throne. It spoke in a voice like wind through a graveyard, cruel and taunting. The human is ours. Come claim him if you dare. But know this, love for one costs the lives of many. Her wolves saw her crumble for the first time. Her knees struck stone, her breath ragged, hands trembling as if the message itself had struck her down. For all her defiance, all her declarations, they had found the one thread of weakness no crown could shield. The council gathered, voices raised like a storm. Some demanded she abandon him, reminding her that no wolf could bleed for a human without staining the pack's honor. Others, more loyal, urged caution, warning that the witches wanted her to act rashly, to trade lives for love. But silence fell when she rose, her eyes rimmed with fire. They think love is a weakness, she said, her voice echoing against the walls. They are wrong. Love is the weapon that broke an alpha. Love is the fire that crowns me now. And I will not abandon him, because if I cannot protect my heart, I cannot protect my pack. The declaration silenced even her harshest critics. Yet deep within, she knew the choice was not so simple. To save him meant marching into the witch's grasp, risking the lives of her wolves against powers they did not understand. To let him go meant betraying the very reason she had risen, unraveling the bond that gave her strength. The nights that followed were restless. Dreams plagued her, visions of him bound in fire. His cries echoing as witches whispered promises of doom. In the morning, her bed felt like a grave, empty without his warmth. The wolves pretended not to notice, but she could see it in their eyes. Pity, doubt, fear that their queen's heart had already broken before the war began. Yet war gave no time for mourning. The witches struck harder, faster, their armies swelling with wolves from rival packs who had bent knee to sorcery. Villages fell like dominoes, and her forces spread thin, chasing shadows. Each victory they earned was hollow, for the witch's power was not measured in land but in despair. One night, as the moon bled red over the horizon, she gathered her closest warriors in the war room. Maps lay shredded with claw marks, stones stained with spilled blood. She stood over them like a figure carved from fury itself. "We cannot fight this war blind," she said. "We must strike at their heart. And their heart lies where they hold him." Her warriors bristled, some in loyalty, others in doubt. One finally spoke the question all feared. "And if he is already dead?" Her gaze turned sharp as steel. "Then I will burn their world until they join him." The plan was reckless, perhaps suicidal. To march into the witch's sanctum was to step into the jaws of death itself. But she had never been a creature of caution. Her life had been forged in defiance, her crown claimed in fire. If the witches thought to break her by stealing him, they would learn instead what it meant to wake the wrath of a queen who had nothing left to lose. The march began under a sky heavy with storm. Wolves followed, loyal and trembling alike, knowing the path ahead might lead only to graves. The forests grew darker as they advanced, shadows twisting unnaturally, whispers in the wind promising ruin. The closer they drew, the stronger the air tasted of metal and ash. And then, at the edge of the witch's domain, they saw him. He hung from chains of fire, suspended above an altar carved with runes that glowed like molten veins. His body was battered, blood staining his torn shirt, but his eyes still burned with life when they found hers. Even through agony he smiled, a smile that said he had not yet surrendered. But the witches surrounded him, cloaked in smoke and flame, their voices weaving chants that thickened the air until every breath felt like drowning. One stepped forward, eyes black as void, lips curling in mockery. "You came, Queen of Wolves. Bow now, and perhaps we will leave you your lover's bones." Her wolves growled, claws scraping stone, but she lifted a hand to silence them. Her gaze never left the witch. "I do not bow," she said. "Not to kings, not to curses, and not to you." The battle erupted. Wolves clashed with witches, steel clanged against sorcery, fire scorched fur and flesh. She plunged into the storm, her only thought the chains that bound him. Each step was agony, the very earth rebelling against her, yet she forced her way forward, claws tearing through spell after spell. She reached him, her hands searing as she gripped the chains. The fire bit deep, skin blistering, but she did not let go. With a roar that split sky from earth, she tore the chains apart, dragging him free. His weight collapsed against her, weak but alive, his arms clinging to her like the last anchor in a storm. But freedom came at a price. The witch's chant rose to a crescendo, and the altar beneath them cracked open, light pouring upward as if the world itself had split. Something ancient stirred, something darker than curses, older than wolves. She clutched him close, her wolves rallying around her, and shouted over the chaos. "This war has only begun." And with that they fled into the storm, the witch's laughter echoing behind them, a promise that what she had awakened tonight would devour them all. The war's embers still glowed in the ruined heart of the kingdom. Smoke lingered like a permanent shadow in the air, seeping into fabric, hair, and memory. Walls that once glittered with banners and torchlight now bore scars, charred black from flame and streaked red from battle. The land groaned under the weight of conflict, but it was not the land alone that was broken. Hearts, too, carried fissures that no Alpha decree could mend. Celine stood at the balcony of the Alpha King's keep, her hair whipping in the dawn's wind, her eyes scanning the wreckage below. The people moved like ants rebuilding after a storm, picking, hauling, burying. There were no cheers for victory, no songs of triumph, only silence, punctuated by the scraping of shovels and the low keening of mothers who had lost sons. Her chest ached as she watched them. She had married into this world of power and wolves, had taken the vows before goddess and pack, but her heart had never been allowed to rest. In the Alpha's embrace, she had known protection, command, the certainty of walls and soldiers. Yet in the stolen memories of her first love, she had tasted something the Alpha could never cage: freedom. She pressed her hand against the stone railing, eyes narrowing as the Alpha King's voice rose behind her. "Do you see what loyalty costs?" His tone rumbled, equal parts grief and command. "Blood, sweat, lives. Yet they remain. That is strength, Selene. That is the mark of my reign." She turned slowly. He stood tall in the doorway, his shoulders broad beneath a cloak heavy with wolf fur. His eyes gleaming with that sharp, possessive glint that always made her stomach twist with unease. He had fought for her, bled for her, nearly died for her. Yet for all his devotion, there was a hardness in him that she could never break through. Love in his world was loyalty. Love in hers had once been choice. "You think they rebuild for you," she whispered, bitterness curling around her words. "But they rebuild for themselves. For their children. For the hope that tomorrow won't look like today." His jaw flexed. He stepped closer, his scent of smoke and pine filling the air between them. "And who gives them that hope? Who shields them from what lurks beyond the borders? Do you think your soft-hearted boy from the past could have stood against an army of wolves?" Her lips parted, but no words came. He always knew how to stab at the memory of her first love, twisting it into frailty, into weakness. Yet she remembered different things. His laughter when they ran through the meadows barefoot, the way he listened as though every word she spoke was scripture, the fire in his eyes that belonged only to her and not to a kingdom. He had been mortal in a world of wolves, yes, but his love had been immortal. The Alpha reached for her, his hand brushing her cheek. It was not rough, not cruel. There was tenderness in it, but also ownership, a branding touch that declared her his. "You are mine, Selene. You swore it before the goddess. No past, no ghost, no whisper will change that." She closed her eyes. The vow bound her, yes, but deep within her, something else stirred. Something the goddess herself had not extinguished. That night, Selene wandered the ruins beyond the keep. Her gown swept the ash, her feet bare upon the earth as though she were searching for a tether. She did not expect to hear the whistle. A sound so faint, so familiar, carried on the breeze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. It couldn't be. She followed it, breath sharp, down into the hollow where the river cut through stone. And there, between shadows and mist, he stood. Older, scarred but alive. Her first love. "Selene." His voice broke on her name. She stumbled forward, tears already hot on her cheeks. "I thought you were gone. They told me. They told you what they wanted you to believe." His eyes flared with pain and relief in equal measure. He reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, the world stilled. She felt it, the truth of him, the bond that had never been severed. No Alpha vow could erase this. But reality crashed back with his next words. "They'll kill me if they know I'm here. The Alpha, he can't ever know." Her chest constricted. She was torn in two, between the man she had been bound to by law, and the man her heart still burned for. Above them a howl split the night sky. The Alpha King's howl. Selene's stomach dropped. He was searching for her. She turned back to her first love, voice trembling. "If he finds you." "He won't," he whispered, though his eyes betrayed the lie. "But you have to choose, Selene. No more shadows. No more stolen moments. Choose me, or walk away forever." Her breath hitched. The goddess had written one fate for her, yet destiny itself demanded another. She stood between two worlds, the gilded cage of the Alpha and the dangerous freedom of forbidden love. And as the howls drew nearer, the earth itself seemed to wait for her answer. The night of reckoning came dressed not in silence but in thunder. The skies cracked with a storm that felt older than the mountains themselves, a fury that seemed woven from the goddess's hand. Wolves prowled restless in the shadows of the keep, their yellow eyes flashing each time lightning split the clouds. The land itself trembled, as if it sensed that decisions made this night would echo for generations. Celine stood at the threshold of the great hall, her heart a storm within her chest. She was caught between two fires, the Alpha King whose vow bound her body and her first love whose memory still commanded her soul. Every breath she took seemed like a betrayal to one and a prayer to the other. Inside, the Alpha sat at his throne, head tilted as though he heard the goddess whispering in the storm. His presence filled the chamber, broad shoulders, predator's eyes, the weight of command that silenced every guard in the room. He did not rise when she entered. He did not need to. His power reached her even across the distance. "You were not in your chamber," he said, voice like gravel ground by thunder. Her lips parted, words fumbling. "I needed air." His gaze sharpened. He smelled the truth beneath her skin. He always did. Wolves were hunters of scent and heartbeat, and he had learned hers too well. "Air," he repeated slowly. "Or memory." She froze. And then, behind her, the impossible happened. A step. A man's presence entering the hall without invitation. Gasps broke from the guards, blades flashed, but the intruder raised his hands, his jaw set, his eyes burning not with fear but defiance. Her first love had walked willingly into the lion's den. The Alpha rose finally. The storm outside seemed to bow to him as he stood, every line of his body strung tight with lethal rage. "You dare," he said, voice so low it shook the hall. "You dare walk into my court and breathe her name." Celine's heart split. She moved forward instinctively, standing between the two men. Lightning illuminated her pale face, her trembling hands raised as though she could hold back gods. "Stop this," she pleaded. "Both of you. Haven't we bled enough?" Her first love's eyes softened on her. "Celine, you don't belong in chains. You never did. Whatever vows were forced from your lips, your heart was mine before his crown ever touched his head." The Alpha snarled, fangs glinting. His voice broke like a whip. "She is mine by law, by blood, by the goddess herself. What claim do you have, boy?" The boy no longer. Scars cut across his arms, his face, a testament to battles fought in exile. He stood straighter now, no longer the tender dreamer Celine had once run barefoot with, but a man forged by survival. "The claim of love freely given," he said. "Not seized. Not demanded." The Alpha lunged, but Celine's cry stopped him mid-stride. "No!" Her voice cracked like the storm. She stood tall, trembling but unbroken. For the first time, she turned her back on both men and faced the goddess's altar at the far end of the hall. The marble gleamed in the stormlight, its carvings deep with wolf sigils. "Goddess," she whispered, her voice carrying louder than she expected. "If you truly see me, then hear me now. I will not be caged between law and memory. Tonight I choose not as wife or possession, but as myself." The hall hushed. The Alpha's breath came harsh and ragged. Her first love's eyes widened, uncertain. And then the impossible happened. The altar glowed. A silver flame erupted from the carved wolves, spilling across the stone floor, curling around Celine's feet. She gasped as the light wound up her body like a second skin. The goddess was answering. A voice, neither male nor female but older than wind, filled the chamber. "Child of two paths, your heart cries for freedom. The vow you swore was forged in power, not love. Tonight the chains break." The Alpha staggered, his face pale with fury and disbelief. "No, she is mine. You cannot." But the goddess's flame rose higher, and with it, Celine felt the vow inside her chest unravel, thread by thread. The invisible leash that had tethered her to the Alpha snapped. The silence that followed felt louder than thunder. Celine gasped for breath, staggering forward. For the first time since her wedding day, she felt the full weight of her own heartbeat, unfettered, unowned. Her first love rushed to her, but she held up a hand. Not to stop him, but to steady herself. She turned to both men, her voice trembling yet clear. "Alpha, you gave me walls and shields. You gave me your vow and your kingdom. But you never gave me choice. And choice is love's first breath. She turned to her first love, tears spilling. And you gave me freedom, fire, laughter. But love cannot live only in memory. If I choose you, it must be for who you are now, not the boy I remember. The hall held its breath. Wolves pressed low to the floor, sensing the divine still crackling in the air. Celine inhaled sharply, the storm rattling the windows as if urging her to speak the final truth. So tonight I choose myself. Not queen, not prisoner, not runaway. Celine. The alpha roared, his fury a sound of betrayal that could shatter stone. Her first love closed his eyes, heartbreak etching his features. But Celine stepped away from them both. Lightning shattered the ceiling's highest arch, raining sparks across the marble floor. In that glow, she walked alone, past throne and altar, past guard and ghost. Wolves parted before her, bowing not to crown or rebellion, but to the silver fire still flickering in her wake. When dawn broke, the keep was quiet. The alpha sat alone on his throne, a king without a queen. Her first love stood at the riverbank, waiting though she did not come. Celine had vanished into the forest, where the goddess's voice still whispered. Not bound, not owned, not torn between two worlds. At last, she was free to write her own. And the legend the people would tell in the years to come was not of the Alpha King or the boy who defied him, but of the woman who walked away from both and became something neither crown nor vow could contain. They would call her the Lone Wolf Queen, though she wore no crown. And in her freedom lay a power the world had never seen. To watch more audiobooks, kindly subscribe to this channel. Also don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comment section.